Today, every business is a digital business. Most of us are migrating workloads to the cloud, adopting DevOps tools, rolling out RPA software, and supporting a remote workforce. While opportunity is great, so is the risk of advanced cyber attacks. Many high-profile breaches start with a compromise of privileged credentials. CyberArk is the #1 leader in privileged access management. Talk to CyberArk today to secure privileged access for humans and machines across hybrid and cloud environments and on endpoints. Learn more at securityweekly.com/CyberArk and stay one step ahead of the attackers. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. A quick announcement. Learn how hidden vulnerabilities lead to application compromise with our next webcast from Sneak. Register for our upcoming webcast or virtual trainings by visiting securityweekly.com/webcasts. Also, to access the archive, go to securityweekly.com/on-demand. Super excited to have Sneak and do a webcast with them. We're going to hack an application live. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you tune in. Zack Moody is here with us. He currently serves as the head of global cybersecurity and privacy at AVX Corporation. He spent over 15 years in information security related positions, and over the past several years, his focus has been immersed in establishing global cybersecurity and privacy programs. Zack, welcome to the program.
What's up, guys? Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you on, Zack. We were talking about essentially about how we communicate to executives and management the issues of security. And Zack, I like your approach because I think sometimes we get caught up in like the details and the kind of nuances of it. But basically, you're like, yeah, the formalities. And basically, Zack's like, look, I like to joke around with my executives. Get to know them, and not take things overly seriously. Like we're all humans, right?
Yeah.
So Zack, I think it's a great start and a great approach, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like we were talking about earlier this morning, Paul. I don't even know why we have to get ready for these live webcasts, right? I mean, it's just normal day to day for us.
Mm-hmm.
But we were joking around, and just to kind of continue our conversation is. I go to executive meetings and I say, hey guys, the only reason why I wear a sport coat sometimes is just so you guys take me seriously, right? Half of them or the majority of the executives, right, are probably at least twice my age, and so you tend to play into a lot of the human instinct where you have egos that get involved, and you have this sense of well, he's younger, he doesn't really get it, or he's the new age, right? He's the cyber guy who which is a topic that nobody really understands from a few generations back. So you tend to get this feel where you can't really get a seat at the table, and so you really have to get in front of them and be willing to sacrifice, be willing to negotiate. You got to have thick skin, right? You got to have some humility. And you just got to go in there and just be honest and be honest with yourself and do the right things and do it accordingly to what's best for the company.
Yeah, and I think, I think your board probably trusts you not because you put on a sport coat, right? But more because of the honesty, integrity portion, right?
Correct.
You're not doing a lot of I think a lot of us can fall into a trap of doing a lot of hand waving, a lot of FUD, right? Like you should be worried about this, right?
Definitely don't do that.
Yeah, we can't do that. We have to be honest and frank with the board, right? And in the language they understand as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can get trapped into that FUD concept, right? Mm-hmm. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I always, there's a joke with a running joke with our chief operating officer, Jeff. He tends to, when he sees me in the hallway, he says, "Oh, Zack, what bad news you bringing us today?"
Right.
And it's a joke, and it's a joke that we have between each other. But I continue to reassure them that, hey, look, I'm not here just to deliver bad news in order to sell my agenda. Mm-hmm. My agenda is based on truth. It's based on facts. It's based on data, and that's one thing we talked about earlier, Paul, is that all the decisions that we have to make as cybersecurity, privacy, you name it, security, something professionals, is we have to make decisions based on data, because that's the evidence that we need, and it's the foot or the leg to stand on when making decisions and when presenting things to the business.
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, Zach, is you have to understand your business, right? In your case, you're a manufacturer, pretty distributed. You're not necessarily going to come in and deploy what you would at a financial organization, right? I mean, you have to understand the differences about how your company works versus maybe some other company, and build a program that's applicable to the business requirements. And I think that's a challenge for some
and
people.
data that's applicable, right? Like Zach talked about bringing data. I think a lot of us tend to bring data from outside sources, right? What Zach talked about is, we bring data from the internally, right, and present that data in a way that people can understand.
Yeah, and the thing is that there's no one program that fits everything, right? I can't pick up this program that I've built, right, and go take it and throw it into maybe the education industry or financial industry, right? There's always going to be elements that have to be modified or modified to be accepted into that business, right? Every business is unique, and so there's never going to be that one model that fits all. And I think that's one challenge that a lot of people run into. And the other thing is that I can't do this by myself, and so if somebody else is writing the policies, if somebody else is tackling objectives that I feel like I should have my hands on, who cares, right? Because I'm being held to a standard, or being held accountable for the security of our company, right? And our business, our data, our interest, intellectual property. So as long as the goal is being met, who cares who does the job? It's a team effort. And that's another thing, is that you have to have business buy-in from every angle.
Right. And you don't want security to be that shim, kind of what you're alluding to, right? I don't want to be the wall that everyone has to either go around or poke a hole in, right? Because I want to feel important. What you're saying is, if other people are doing a good job of protecting our intellectual property, that's great. I don't have to be a shim, in their business processes to feel good about myself that I'm doing security.
As much as we believe in, security, cybersecurity should be separate and report outside of IT, right? And that shouldn't be discussed with hard feelings or anything like that. It's really purely from a standpoint of there are a lot of conflicts of interest there, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm pushing up or presenting the idea of to reduce risk across the organization with something that interferes with the IT's agenda, right? Mm-hmm. They have the upper hand. They have the say so. So the first thing that really needs to be established is a committee, an executive committee that's involved from various parts of the business. That way you can get some buy-in, right? So there's some accountability there.
Mm-hmm. Affecting change isn't just trying to work with one group or one person to get them to do things more securely, right? It's got to have buy-in across the whole organization. Yeah,
and real quick, going back to that comment is what I'm trying to do is allow these IT groups across the world that have been doing their job for years, right, and decades before I've gotten there. Why try to take it out of their hands? Why not just empower them with the solutions that we feel like meet the needs for the organization? Take antivirus, for example. Antivirus does not do anything anymore, right? You can get the free Windows Defender out of the box. It doesn't good enough of what antivirus has done for years. You still need it, but you need something bigger, right? You need EDR, something that's going to monitor behavioral, right? So replace it, but give them the ability to manage their environment like they have this whole time. And then we sit on the outside and audit, right? We sit as advisors. I always tell my team, we are the consultants to the business, and Paul and I were talking earlier is that CISOs really need to understand that they are a technical advisor to the business, technical advisor to the CEO. That's it. I mean, they are there not to be, they're there to be a business partner. And that's one thing that I'm very passionate about. And again, I don't think it requires an MBA. I think CISOs need to be technical first, and I think they need to be the experts in their field. They don't need to be business experts. I think the business and more businesses need to understand that, and they need to take the time to educate their CISOs and get them the business training that they feel like they need.
Matt? Yeah, Zack, I'm curious about the physical security side because you have all these different manufacturing sites. I assume the plant managers are also part of this executive kind of group because I don't know how much of the physical security aspects you own is in the CISO role. I've seen variations here, but I mean, you've got a lot of physical aspects here with plant managers that also have to be managed as part of a broader security ecosystem or program here, right?
Yeah, so I don't own physical security outright. That is something that obviously I'm tied into in a lot of angles and a lot of ways, and I can see in the future that probably will fall underneath my scope completely. But you're exactly right. I mean, plant managers they're the boss, right? And for years in this distributed environment, everything flows through those plant managers. Plant managers are responsible for that product that they're producing. They're responsible for how efficient, how good that business is growing for that company. So they're there to protect it no matter what. So you're exactly right. I mean, your executive committee needs to also entail some elements of operations, right? So COO is definitely somebody that's a key player.
Yeah, and Zack, I think you're touching on a subject that I've found as a characteristic of very effective CISOs and security teams, and that is enabling all of the other areas of business to do their jobs better, and just inherent in that is it's more secure, right?
Yeah, we should be that tiered. We should be that escalation point, right? The consultants, a team player, right? We shouldn't feel less of a security professional if we're allowing somebody else to play with our toys, right? If you want to speak in those terms, because we all know security guys, right? Hackers, we're break fix. I'm a break fix type of guy. That's how I've learned. I've done it my whole life, and so you're dealing with a lot of the legacy IT minds too, from like the administrator's standpoint, where they feel like we're tinkering around in their backyard.
Right.
And it shouldn't be that way. We're here to educate and help. And so you've got to continually, you've got to have patience. Definitely got to have patience, like patience of Job almost, where you're constantly having to educate them on the reasons why we're here.
Right. And there's a technical aspect and understanding that you have to have, but also an intelligence and threat understanding. And a lot of your background comes from when you were in the Army, right? And I found that same characteristic. And actually I get into conversations with my neighbor and I'm like, so whoa, wait, you broke down like every tribe in Afghanistan, right? So I'm like, let's talk about that and then overlay that with some of the technical threats. That's a great kind of threat intelligence report for your board if you can distill down not just the technical aspect of how people may break in, but also some of the political and other things that are happening in the world in that combination to paint a better picture of a threat.
Yeah, this is the good stuff. This is what I enjoy, and I think this is one thing that really can set yourself apart from other leaders, even other business leaders within your organization. This is what could make the difference. And it's really something that's important for the board. And if it's not, it's your job as a CISO to instruct the board on why it should be important to them, right?
Right.
You wouldn't be doing your job if you did not communicate these things with the CEO and other elements of the business.
Yeah, and I think it helps you overcome that.
Good, bad, or ugly.
Overcome that notion that folks often have of, well, why would someone target me, right? Because that's still fairly predominant
today.
Hear
it all the time.
Right? And you hear it all the time.
We're not Target. We're not Amazon. We're not Google, right? Or Microsoft. Who cares? We're part of the supply chain.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Let's say we're not. Take for example, you name it. Take like BMW or Volkswagen or somebody like that, right? An auto manufacturer. yeah, we're not them, but we have parts that go into those automobiles, right? Or we're part of that supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look back historically through some of these breaches, right? What they've started to term accidental breach, right? They may be targeting, they could be targeting or working their way towards the bigger player, right? The BMWs, the GEs, right? But along the way, they're collecting data on some of the other suppliers,
right,
and some of the other vendors and third parties that we may be.
Yeah, and I know I use Stuxnet as an example a lot lately because I'm finishing with a book by Kim Zetter, right? But there's a lot of aspects to that campaign that I don't think necessarily get enough attention. And one of those is the reason why we had so much intelligence about what was happening in the plants in Iran is because there were campaigns that went back years that were looking at, well, how would parts and supplies flow into Iran? And those places were compromised merely just to gain intelligence to complete that operation, right? And that's a very high-level overview. The book goes into great detail. And some speculation, right? Because we don't, no one's going to officially speak on, or not no one, but few are going to officially speak on some of those subjects. But when you start to put all the pieces together, you're like, yeah, like anyone can be a target because you might have a piece of information that's playing into a larger campaign.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. From the military's perspective, when you're conducting operations, let's say it is Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, back when, the days when I was in Iraq, we're collecting HUMINT, SIGINT, right? Signal intelligence, human intelligence. And then, I think, and I really hope that we're going to see intelligence and cybersecurity merge in a big way, mm-hmm. If not this year, but next year in the military. And I think it's absolutely necessary because, again, if you look at the topic of, this discussion, is cybersecurity is a mindset, and it's taking the intelligence mindset and applying it to technology and the skills that haven't changed since creation, right?
Right.
I mean, a packet is still a packet. Mm-hmm. An IP address is still an IP address, MAC address. All that stuff is still the same. And all these vendors, I mean, they're just piling technology that in a lot of ways make our jobs easier, but they're just applying it on top of technology that still exists when it was created, right? And so cybersecurity, again, is the mindset. You got to have the mind to take the data that you get regardless, right? These systems and these technologies, they're creating data, but how do we view the data? What are we actually looking for, right? And so I really challenge my guys and the business to help us develop, I'm not here to talk about vendors, but I like Splunk's concept. Once I learned it, it was very, it works for us, right? It was easy for me to understand, even though I was very intimidated about it at first. But it's the common language, right? It's a common information model, right? And so building out that custom to your business, right? That's where you're bringing that intelligence and you're matching it with the security and the mindset, and that's when you're going to get that threat package that you really need.
Yeah, and I also think there's education for executives as well that think of threats differently without the cyber aspect, right? And we really have to combine those technical aspects with some of the more traditional threats and explain that in a meaningful way. Which is different, and tools do help that, but there's you got to bridge that gap of we've seen it, false flag operations, right? Those have been happening, like you said, since the beginning of time, right? Now they happen slightly differently in the cyber realm, but it's still the same thing, and it's still potentially a risk to the business depending on the business.
Correct. I mean, what's your threat model, right? And again, one threat, and of course, the media is the media, mm-hmm. And in today's world, we get information thrown at us. It's unbelievable how much information gets thrown at us on a daily basis, and we're expected to do magic with it. The thing about it is you got to cut out the noise, and you got to take, and you got to look through, and you got to challenge yourself and discipline yourself and your teams to look beyond just the headlines, right?
Right. And that's where executives tend to focus. I mean, look at the attention Zoom got, right? Was that?
Oh, it's crazy.
Should that be the top thing on everyone's mind in terms of the threat that Zoom poses, right? Probably not.
Perfect use case. I mean, I'm still running into challenges to where they're wanting to cut out Zoom from our environment, and there's no justification because the same principles apply no matter what the technology is.
Right.
You just because let's say it's secure, regardless of whether it's Zoom or not, but let's say it's secure today rather than yesterday, doesn't mean you should act differently, right? You should still treat and be careful about what information you're sharing across these platforms because it's still sitting on somebody else's server, even if it's Microsoft or Google or, that's the whole concept of cloud. It's somebody else's environment, and you have to keep that in mind. And Zoom, that's a whole different topic of discussion. And I've got my opinions there, but
some of it's keeping the board focused too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, you got to cut out that noise, and you have to take just because Adobe has a massive, let's say, vulnerability in their encryption protocol or something like that.
They always have some massive vulnerability in at least one of their products.
Right, so it's perfect use case, right? And as sexy as that sounds and as awesome as we want to dig into it, just as much as I love dissecting malware, right? As cool as that is it meaningful, right? I mean, I still do it on the side to keep up with my skills and things like that, but does it even apply to our environment?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So cut it out, right? So create your own risk metrics. So if this comes into our environment or we see this in the headline, well, it's like, why are we even getting this? Because we don't even have Adobe in our environment, right?
Right.
So that'd be the first red flag. So just cut it out. And the other thing too is that could be a risk in just the U.S., right?
Yeah,
but if you have operations in Asia and Europe, it may not be a risk over there. So you have to be smart, and you have to be able to spin the data. I know my guys are probably watching this, and they're probably like, "Oh, here's Zack on another tangent, right?" He won't ever shut up. But it's all about spinning the data. I want to be able to look into our environment and be able to pull metrics on a specific location, a specific person, right? Everybody's an asset. Everybody's an object. And every object needs to be measured. And so, again, the data is all there. It's just how you think about it. It's the mindset.
Yep. And then translating that to your board is
correct.
Probably most often the challenge, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, that's why I have the sport coat, right?
That's right. I love the sport coat. Any final tips, Zack, on speaking to your board management about issues of security? I know it's one of the probably top challenges that many of us have in security.
Yeah. So again, be real, be human, and understand that they're wanting to be treated as such. A lot of people are fearful to speak to them. Again, the formalities, right? One, I'm very thankful and blessed that they allow me the opportunity to just walk down the hall, be able to have the open door and have a communication when I need it. But don't be scared to go toe to toe with your CEO to say, hey, I cut your account off because of X, Y, and Z, but I'm here to help you get it reestablished, right? Don't be scared to have those conversations because, again, that's why they hired you, right? So you constantly have to, don't fall into the traps, but be tactful, right? And have a sense of humor and be and the biggest thing for me is admit your faults. Admit when you don't know, admit when you're wrong, admit if you've messed up, because only then can we start to move forward.
But
right?
I think that's an important point. Admitting things that security can get in the way, right? And admitting that. I think a lot of us try and brush that under the rug. To get security done. Certainly I've been guilty of that in the past, but that balance between security and usability is always going to be there. And I think you're right, Zack. Being honest about it is get it out in the open.
And allow and get feedback. I mean, I reach out to people and it probably drives them crazy, but it's like, hey, I put people in pilot groups all the time, and I'm sure they get frustrated, but that's how. I'm okay taking the heat because that's how we make our systems better, right? Because we want to be an enabler, a business business partner, not an inhibitor. And that's the whole concept and why people are trying to push which I love, it pushed the topic of security first, privacy first. Because if you bring us into the picture at the very beginning of these conversations or before you make an M&A or purchase something, right, we can protect you from buying a breach, you know, as the saying goes. But if we're in the conversations and part of the project at the very beginning, then you're reducing the risk of us being a roadblock later on down the road.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's the whole reason why that concept exists.
Well, Zack, thank you very much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be back on next week, right?
Absolutely. Zack's going to be a regular. Thanks again, Zack. With that, we will conclude the show for today. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Thanks, Zack. We will see you next time on Enterprise Security Weekly.